on as we're going through, but let's get started anyway. Before we really get going, we just want to make sure we make note a couple of additional upcoming chances to get together actually in person, which is great. I think everybody's really excited about that. We have some socials coming up Thursday, May 6th in the Eastern region. We got a social coming up. Then May 13th, I think in Charlotte is you guys are the Old Mech Brewery, I believe, is where we're headed. And then in the Piedmont, we have Thursday, May 20th, again, Joymongers. And so getting together outside, invite people that might be interested, come together, share some stories and some time. Really looking forward to that. I'm planning to be in the Raleigh and the Piedmont. Hopefully, I can get down to the Charlotte one too, and see everybody. In addition, we have a couple of other these lunch and learns. Artie Bolick is going to present on May 11th at noon about some recent developments in the construction law. And then on May 25th, we have Barbara Thornton with People Development Partners. Is going to give a presentation talking about leading through change, something we've experienced a lot of, over the last year. So some really good stuff coming up there. And then want to express our, sincere gratitude to Clancy and Thay's team, Harry, Laura, Kyle, for today's lunch and learn. I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be a really interesting topic. Driving collaboration between design and construction technology, and something that if we can really do it well, helps us, helps the owner, helps contractors, helps refine the process, and should be really good. And excited to hear and thankful for you guys. And so with that, I will stop talking.
Thanks, Aaron. I will pick it up from here. So thanks again for having us. We are excited to be talking about this topic. Obviously, it's something that we're all passionate about. I'm Harry McKinney, Vice President of Technology at Clancy and Thay's, and my co-speakers will be Laura Kaiser and Kyle Snyder, both virtual design and construction coordinators here. One interesting thing about us is that we all have architectural degrees and have worked in architectural firms before making this transition into construction. I'll tell you a little bit about Clancy and Thay's Construction. Many of y'all may know us already, but we have 5 division offices up and down the East Coast. Of course, an office there in Charlotte. We were founded in '49, a 17-year-old privately held firm. Last year, our volume was around 634 million total annual revenue, and we ranked 36 among the top contractors in the Southeast. So we're proud of that. And so today, the agenda quickly is going to cover that. A very quick introduction to virtual design and construction. Most of y'all know what that's all about. I'll back up just a second. Yeah, I'll just hit these agenda items. And what we're going to talk about, many of the professionals, designers, and contractors are already familiar with a lot of these tools, probably using a lot of these tools. Some of you out there may not have seen them totally in action. So what we wanted to do is just give you an example of what some contractors are doing, particularly what we're doing, and how we are using these tools, we think sometimes in a unique way to us. And I think it'll just help give you some ideas of what is there and how we can all work together to create a more collaborative environment. And some of those tools that we use are reality capture, model coordination, collaborative reviews, which we will certainly touch on those among some other things. And at the end, have some time for Q&A. So I had the opportunity to attend a webinar recently featuring Martin Fisher. He's a professor at Stanford University, and you can be forgiven if you don't recognize that name, but he is considered the father of the process that's called virtual design and construction, or VDC. So he began his presentation with a quote from his father that I think is a great way to start this program. I'm not going to get into the full story, but it seems the 11-year-old Martin did a lousy job with the task that he'd been assigned by his dad, and he admitted that it was because it was too much trouble to go down 2 flights of stairs to retrieve the tool he needed for the job. So when Martin fessed up to his dad, his father said, "You're an idiot if you're not using the best tool possible." So I think that planted the seed in Martin's head for virtual design and construction. So what is VDC? I'm not going to get into a 2-hour description, but basically it uses computer models and other tools to help visualize cost, schedule, and process. And VDC is an inherently collaborative process. While we use the technology to help us through these processes, it's really about the people and about the collaboration of the team, but the tools help make that process more efficient. So a couple of quotes here I think really tell it all. One is this from the American Institute of Architects, and that is that BIM provides a platform for collaboration through the design and the construction process. And then another one that I particularly like from Martin Schrays is the key to successful collaborations is the creation and the management of shared space. And that shared space is what is so important to make this work, and it's what a lot of these softwares allow us to do. So, and a typical BIM process, this is where we started 14 years ago, and it really remains the central core of what we do. There are 2 stages of coordination in any kind of a construction project. At first, it starts with the designer, and they develop a proof of concept to be sure that what they have designed will actually work in the field. But then it comes to the contractor. And so why would the contractor also be creating a model if the designers have done so? Well, many times the specs are performance-based and not prescriptive. So the items that have been furnished by the sub might not match the component that's in the model. So sizes are not necessarily going to be the same, which could cause conflicts. There's also a lot of new information that's brought from the subs at this point, code information, shop standards, and sometimes, believe it or not, some things just don't work out as they are expected. So that's where the contractor comes in. So we start replacing the designer models with our subcontractor models to do this final coordination process. But what's really fascinating today is that there are so many new tools or technologies that are available that allow us to capture the real world around us and merge it with what we are setting out to build. This helps us see our projects in a very new way, and it gives us more opportunities for collaboration. It basically expands that shared space that I mentioned earlier. Some of those reality capture technologies include photogrammetry, where we use a drone to capture existing site conditions, which we can then convert to a digital 3D model, a laser scan, which will also produce a very accurate 3D model of a built space, or a camera that takes 360-degree photos. So now I want to turn it over to Laura and Kyle. They're going to show you how we are using all these technologies on our projects.
All right, thanks, Harry. So starting off here, I'm going to run through just 2 of those reality capture items that Harry touched on, kind of explain them a little bit further, and then we'll jump into some case studies and show how we're really utilizing those. So from the reality capture perspective, one that always gets a bunch of buzz is the drone technology. And so we're not using anything special. It's just a commercial grade drone that anyone can go out and buy. And it really allows you to get some really great angles, unique angles of the project that we weren't once able to do in the past. And so with that, there's kind of a little added feature in here of not only just using the drone, but there's some added softwares that we're using that not only allow us to, we can fly it manually, but we can also automate some of these flights. And as Harry kind of touched on before, it uses something called photogrammetry, which I kind of throw this in here. I think it kind of describes it very simply. It's kind of the science of calculating measurements from photos. So it does a lot of neat stuff in the background. The one software we're using in-house here is actually SiteScan, which is owned by Esri. And so it allows us to take photos, convert that into 3D geometry where we can use, 2D images, generate contours, elevations, allow us to do a lot of really cool stuff just from photos. And so this kind of explains the process, and you actually see this project in the case study in some coming sections. But essentially it allows us to select what boundary we want to do. It auto-generates the flight path of the drone. You kind of fine-tune your settings. You push it out there, then you go out to the site, With that app, you have the drone, you fly it, and then you can get back that data that I just touched on before. So with the data, we really get like 3 things back. We get a top-down 2D site plan image, and then you can get some 3D files as well, point cloud, and a mesh file. And so here's kind of a video just showing you what that looks like in real time. Hopefully it's coming through okay through the video. But there you saw a point cloud. Here's just spinning the mesh model around. And like I mentioned before, you'll see this project in a coming section of how we kind of merged it with some of the modeling components. And then this last one, this top-down satellite image, this is great if you want like a real-time site plan of your job site. If anyone's gone on Google Earth, I mean, you know, those can get outdated pretty quickly. And then the last thing we can do here with our automated process is we can actually go up and take some panorama photos with the drone. So on the left, you can see there's like 30 images there. It takes separate images and then allows us to stitch them together into a single image. And then we can view it in multiple different ways, but here's just kind of a panning view of what that panoramic looked like in one of our sites in downtown Raleigh. So that segues into the other reality capture technology that we're using is a handheld 360 camera. So you can see on the left-hand side, I mean, we can mount those to our hard hats. We can put them on tripods. There's many different uses for them. And much like with the drone, you have the technology itself, but then you have the software. So for us, we're also partnering with OpenSpace. And this allows us to take that camera, do our walks, and actually automates this into a virtual job site walk. So much like Google Earth Street View, we can walk our site and actually we can virtually rewalk it anytime in the past. So we can do entire job sites, we can do areas of a building, or even specific rooms if it's something that we want to do. And then this is just kind of a video that gives you a good sense of what that looks like there. So on the left-hand side, we can mount the cameras multiple different ways. That video in the top right corner is just showing you kind of that virtual walk that we did. So basically you access that through a computer, a web browser, anyone can get to it. And we're doing this over the duration of the job. So we're getting, multiple dates. We can compare dates. We can upload some of our model content, which is really fascinating for us to compare, design to being built. And there's just a lot of potential. I mean, there's a whole presentation in this in and of itself. So with that, we're going to move over to model coordination and kind of touch on how we're using, all these technologies together in the course of a project. So the first one I'm going to start out here is one that I was working on, and this one we're actually looking at the site analysis. And so for this, a lot of times we get involved in jobs early on before construction's even started. So in this case, you can see there's overhead power lines kind of bordering 2 sides of the site. There was a lot of talk early on of how that impacted the job itself. So what we're able to do is go out there with the drone technology that I just explained previously, and we can capture these conditions. So here's a view of what that looks like virtually. We can pull some measurements. We can do some neat stuff in there, cutting some profiles and analyzing the site conditions further. And then, we can then take that data and then kind of overlay it on the model itself and provide that additional context. And why that's important is because, the architect's job, what they do the best is really designing the building in and of itself. They don't necessarily have the resources to go ahead and do all the survey of the surrounding conditions like we just mentioned. So that's where we're kind of partnering and really capturing the surrounding conditions so we can analyze this stuff early on in the process. So when we start merging these two together, oftentimes, it takes this nice clean image that you like in designing, and those site conditions kind of make it a bit messy here. So with our technology, we can really kind of walk through the space almost like a video game. So here is kind of a view of one of the softwares where we took that drone scan. You could see there on the left, that little pixelated point file. And then we have the architect and structural model on the right-hand side. And so now we're just doing some quick, analysis early on, seeing how those telephone poles, overhead wires, just the relationship to the building. So once we do this, we can then start logging some of these issues, digging further into it. And how this ultimately ended was then transferring that into a 2D document where we're talking with the design team on clearances we need, talking to the power company on, hey, we need to relocate these wires, what's the process involved, and really allowing us to get a head start and kind of analyzing all the unknowns early on in the project. And I think that would be a good segue into this other case study that I'll let Laura touch on here.
Sure, thanks, Kyle. So this was another, the title of this presentation is about collaboration. So here we were working with the owner to help evaluate the foundation system for a mixed-use property in downtown Raleigh. So similar to what Kyle showed before, here we can take, a drone photo and overlay it on top of the site to give us an idea of what's going on site. It also gives context for this particular case that we're going to talk about with this apartment building and parking deck directly behind it, which you can see in the middle photo on this slide. So once we got out there and started digging, we were hitting rock. We were concerned about blasting being so close to this building back here. So we talked to the owner about it. We came up with some potential solutions, but this is also where we're collaborating more internally. So our project management team is collaborating here with the resources that we have available in VDC, where we wanted to see, and this, not to get into too much of the specifics, but we really wanted to see where we had to dig down to get to rock and where we would have to excavate rock, and then have a conversation with the owner about a potential change to the foundation system in certain areas. So here we've got another kind of updated shot looking at what's going out on site, and we were able to hire VHB to come out and do some borings for us. They gave us the drawing that you can see on the bottom right here, some elevations of where they were hitting rock. So this is pretty low hanging fruit for what we were trying to do. We then took that information and put together a really rough model. So I think a lot of times when we think about 3D computer modeling, we think of super accurate, maybe even photorealistic, or even when we're thinking about coordination, we're thinking about these like fabrication level models from subcontractors. But we can really use some basic modeling like this, which is just showing the surface of that rock based on those points that VHB gave us. So then what we can do is we can take, we're always, like Kyle was showing, we're layering different types of information on top of each other. So in blue here, you can still see that rock surface, and then we put the designer's model on top of it to see where the foundations interacted with that. With those, we're then able to create a lot of 3D sections, 3D perspectives, share this with the owner, and get the conversation going. So we thought this would be like the end point for this exercise, which it was, but then our project manager came back to us and said, what else can we do? So we used more technology that we use during our typical coordination process. If you've all heard of clash detection, seeing where, typical example, you think a pipe going through a duct. Well, here we were looking at foundation versus rock. We're able to provide this view showing where that did happen. And then from that document, we were able to provide a 2D drawing that showed more clearly what these elevations were, where the different breakdowns were, so we could see, what areas specifically might be able to change. Once we had that information, it was another step where it was like, okay, well now what else can we do? We wanted to be able to give our team a really rough calculation of a cut fill analysis looking at this system. So we actually did a little bit more detailed modeling of that surface in order to get what you see on the upper right, being able to calculate that difference there. We then took and this is that same point cloud that Kyle showed earlier in the presentation. So a point cloud is literally like just a bunch of points, but that exist in 3D space. So we take that point cloud and then we layer on top the designer model, and then we can produce same, similar to what we saw in kind of that first exercise, but here we've got the point cloud in there. We can see the rock surface we modeled in blue. You can see the point cloud. You can see how it's following kind of that rock surface below. So this is, a 3D representation, and then the model. So we've got lots of different types of information shown here.
And I think this just showing how it's then layering drawings additionally on top of that, and
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, being able to put 2D information on top of 3D information, I think helps to connect the two. Not everyone is super comfortable, especially when we think about the owner side. I mean, designers can visualize the 2D on top of the 3D, but I think it really helps other people get into the model and the drawings and really see what we're talking about. We can really kind of dip down and like see what's going on underneath. So having all these resources available really helps us layer on all that information. So here we're actually going under. We can see that foundation that we did, you know, the additional modeling of. We can see the point cloud above. So, and that's what I think is really interesting, is that we're able to combine everything to really share better what we are doing with all this information.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll add a note that green is that volume that you were clashing against the rock. So I think
Really
that
kind of
wraps
a
it.
unique
Yeah.
perspective. And then here was an updated shot, which is now even old. It's now complete, pretty much not complete, 100% complete, but pretty much complete. So with that whole exercise, we were able to help our team, the owner, and the design team all with that one shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now just moving from the underground of, you know, that wrap building to MEP coordination with the office building.
Yep. So this is when most people hear VDC that are familiar with the term, this is what you think of. Coordinating systems, mostly overhead in a building. So we typically hold weekly coordination meetings with our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection subcontractors. We get a model from the design team, we get models from our steel fabricator, and we can look at issues that may not have come up during design because of maybe a specialized way the subcontractor is installing something. We get in, you know, sleeves and fittings, all these things that really do impact. In this case, it was looking at roof drain leaders, thinking about how we were able to identify a couple different issues. I mean, this took weeks, but then we're able to provide possible solutions and then work with the design team through a typical RFI process. Sometimes, like you can see in the upper right, it just comes down to we still use 2D drawings, especially for something like this where we're trying to coordinate outfall locations. So being able to identify the problem and provide a solution. Similar to what we did here with some overhead systems coordination, and this was in the core and shell part of the building, where we had a very large duct, which you can see in green, that was kind of throwing a little wrench in our plans. So we do some supplemental modeling here when needed. In this case, it was modeling a ceiling as a potential tenant fit out, so you could see where that actually was dropping below. We're able to evaluate different options. So our subcontractor can model different options. They can also provide cost impact for what that might be. So we can kind of package it all into one when we're giving it to others for review. So being able to have, what's important about this is really having everyone in one room. Well, now it's everyone in one Teams meeting, but sharing the screen, walking through the model really helps us to identify issues and communicate them to get a response.
Okay. Then moving on, now this is, I'm going to touch on a little bit of using the photo side of how we're kind of, you know, using that for some coordination. In this case study, it's really, you know, once we've started construction, there's a lot of questions about what things are going to look like. So in this case, there were some questions about what the various levels of this building, what your view was going to be. So using the panoramic feature of the drone that I touched on previously, I went out and I could preset the heights that I kind of coordinated with the drawing, so I know we're getting up to those exact levels, and basically took 360 panoramas from each of those locations. And using some other software we have, we can create a little bit of an interactive environment where we can share this, people can click and view it on their own. So what you're seeing here is just a few of those levels coming up. And then I'm going to integrate in a video here that kind of shows you just from ground to what the ultimate top floor of this building is going to look like. And this helps, you know, give the ownership and the various people on the team a good sense of what it's going to look like, what the views are going to look like, and help drive, some decisions and marketing later in the process. So here's just this video coming up. We can go ahead and we can capture those, reality conditions. So taking this one step further, another thing that we're starting to do now is not only can we just view these 360 images, but we also can do some of that model integration that you kind of saw with the point cloud, but now on the photo side. So we can load them in the back of these models that we have here. So you see that backdrop there is actually a drone photo, and we can put it behind models to then give you that next level. And so we're doing this internally, and then we're also working with, the architect teams to also provide them the graphics, because, the rendering components is really what they do best. So we can go ahead and capture those conditions and provide it to them to incorporate on their end. So wrapping up this, there's really we're going to jump back to the site that we've kind of been touching on here throughout the presentation. And this is kind of a good illustration of this. So in the beginning of the construction process, there was nothing on the site. It was just a dirt site. So the ownership team had an idea where they wanted to walk over to the parking deck of the first phase there, that piece building. They wanted to look out and see the site, but show them what it was going to look like. So for us, we took the drone, took a 360 image, and then using our other technologies can take 360 images of the model and simply just overlay them in like a typical rendering process I would do like at an architecture firm. So we can put this together. You can access this on the computer, iPad, but the idea is you would walk over to the garage with the iPad, hold it out, and you could see what the future site was going to be. So that way they could take, prospective tenants and whatnot of the site over and actually give them like a virtual walkthrough of what the site was going to be. And I think it came out really well. It's an interesting use case of how we're integrating these various technologies, even from like the photo end. And we're carrying through, we're even carrying this through to the actual construction itself. And I like that end shot because it really shows you, how, realistic and how that these visualizations actually carry through to the future. So we've touched a lot about like visualization with the drones. So now I'm going to touch on here of really how we're using it during construction, because that's also a really fascinating piece of this. So the great thing about the drone technology is we can get perspectives of the job that you wouldn't ordinarily get. And this has really paid big dividends for us in coordinating a lot of the penetrations with the structural concrete slabs. And I'm going to run through a video here, just kind of illustrating some of this process that we've developed here personally in-house here at Clancy and Thays. So we head out to the job site with the drone. We're capturing the conditions using the photogrammetry technology that we touched on. We can stitch this together into a combined reality capture image of the site. Then overlaying this with our coordination drawings out of our typical VDC process, we then can dive in and really confirm installation of the systems. And this is one case where we caught, there was a little miscommunication amongst what was actually going to be put in here. So we're able to identify it, get these sleeves in before it's poured, keep everything on schedule, and everyone happy on the job site there. So this is really a case study here that we found early on. And then since we noted this one item, we just said, okay, this has got to be standard practice. And we've been running with it ever since. And so what you saw there with a little bit of miscommunication is what goes into, a concrete pour on a job site is not simply one drawing. There's, construction drawings, shop drawings, there's, coordination things we're running through. We have photos. So it's really how are we combining all this into one, common piece of software. And so this is a little glimpse behind the scenes of how this process kind of worked. And I have a video here showing how we're starting to layer all this data together. So it's kind of zooming in here and turning on and off, the drawings and the drone photo and just manually checking, are things installed? Are they not? And then we communicate this to our field teams and get it addressed. And we've really kind of pioneered and fine-tuned a process here in Clancy and Thays that we feel pretty confident on going from job to job. I'll just let this play out there. And so, not only we're overlaying 2D images, but then kind of that 3D data, you can even dive further into it. So here's just some other analysis showing you really the level of detail you can get just from photos in a drone. I mean, it's pretty, we think it's pretty amazing here. And so again, taking that, then we can also integrate this into our 3D modeling environments, and we can get some really neat stuff like this video here, where we can take that 2D photo, overlay it in that 3D space and then almost walk through it like a video game, seeing how that, actually what the structural components are under that floor slab. And then rounding this out, not only are we documenting, some of our, concrete slabs with the drone, but then also we're doing virtual walks now with our 360 camera. So, we're walking all of our pour slabs now. And this allows us to really get an added level of documentation of what's going on within the slab itself, making sure things are correct. Really, what Harry touched on at the beginning of the presentation, a space for collaboration amongst the team. So this is really just pushing that mentality of collaboration even further. So here we're just verifying sleeves, embeds. This allows us to not only track the construction of the slab, but then also once it's constructed, we can look back and see, what's actually under that floor. So we can get a little bit of like an X-ray vision here. This is just a little kind of a wow slide just to show off how we can even out there in the field with a cell phone, you can get that X-ray vision, going back and forth between that live camera feed there and then a capture that we had in the past. So not only are we looking under the slab, but we're also doing this for behind the wall conditions, aiding in our coordination amongst the team with the modeling. And then even doing some like as-built walkthroughs at the conclusion of a job. So we're really utilizing this technology in all phases. We've kind of just hit on a few points here today, but there's a lot more, that we're really using it for throughout the duration of our projects. And so with that, I think I'm gonna turn it back over to Laura to kind of touch on a few more of our collaboration tools.
Sure, thanks, Kyle. So I think, well, the stuff we're doing is really cool. We've got open space that Kyle was just showing, different 360 photo apps, drone scans, computer models, but how do we get this all in one spot so that everyone can access it? Because having it just, internal here in our department doesn't bring as much value as giving it to the whole team. So we're using some cloud-based file collaboration. It serves as a lightweight model viewer. No additional software is needed, which is really helpful in getting more access to that model. We can share it with the whole project team. Within it, we can also mark up drawings and models. We're going to show a couple different examples of that, and also creating and tracking issues throughout the length of the project. So we have transitioned on some of our projects using an Autodesk product, the BIM 360 document management. So for those of you in the design world that may be on the call, you're probably familiar with this at this point. One of the, it serves as our document library specifically for our VDC team on each project, and different project teams are adopting it in different ways. One of the nice things here is the permissioning level. So what we can do is, instead of sending an email to someone and just hoping it gets to the right person and not to the wrong person, we can control who views, who downloads, who uploads. We can do it by role, we can do it by person. So it gives us a lot of control, especially when we're thinking about models. We have designer models uploaded here. We don't want subcontractors to upload over it. It gives us the chance to control all of that different stuff. I mentioned it's a lightweight model viewer. So this is within BIM 360 Docs, their model viewer here. So we can establish viewpoints in Navisworks. And then anyone can come in here and click on a viewpoint and get to it. There's a first person walkthrough mode. So if someone wants to actually walk through the model, they can do that. We find that by giving this model access, in this particular case, both the designer and our project manager from Clancy and Thais, we're getting into the model, trying to show this lobby with its exposed systems. You know, obviously we're producing a 2D drawing that shows how they're all laid out, but to really give a feel for the space, which in a space like this, with these exposed systems is really critical. Even showing separate 3D snapshots still isn't quite get the point across. So being able to jump into the model we found to be really useful. And actually this afternoon, I've got another meeting scheduled where we're walking through the model because it does provide so much more value. And in this case, anyone can get in. We can also mark up different issues on here, saying, you know, just like I was saying that some people understand the model environment better. It's often easier, especially if it's something we've identified during coordination, to be able to mark it up on the model. That way we can really see all the different pieces that are impacting it. And we have different ways of doing markups just for ourselves or markups to share with the project team. Creating issues. This was an example actually of a constructability review where we had the design team and the owner in on this particular project. So we could identify issues, place a pin in a model. It shows it where it is in plan. We can assign different information to that. We can also assign responsibility and we can track all this. So we have one place where all this information is being stored, and we can come back and kind of look through these issues and see where they're happening and see, in this case, the latest response was from the architect. We can generate reports from this. So here we just see this list. This was the issue we were just looking at, but we can create detailed reports that show model images, that show, you know, all these responses and give us a good picture of what we've been tracking. We have other software, and this is a platform that's popped up a couple times we've been looking at. We are using this internally now for our VDC coordination issue tracking. We can place stamps and issues directly in the model. So as we're running through a coordination meeting, we'll place an issue, we'll name it. You can see here in this chat, we're really using it more internally right now, but we can essentially create our meeting minutes from this. So if we want to refer back to what exactly did we talk about on June 24th, here's what all these different people said. It helps keep it in one spot instead of some in email, some in meeting minutes, some in viewpoints, markups. It all kind of condenses it into one place, and we can easily flip through these in a meeting. We can also provide reports saying that show, you know, model viewpoints attached with all this information and any updates that have been made. We found it really helpful for our process. One of the reasons we chose this particular product solution is that we can also incorporate 360 photos, we can incorporate drone scans, so we can include, you know, we're talking about all this information, how do we get it all into one spot? And this is one way we found to include those. And we've highlighted this a couple times, is putting that 2D drawing on top of a 3D model. It really helps, especially when this is more of an overall section, but if we get down into like a more detailed wall section, we can help our pre-construction team, maybe showing where some supplemental steel that would not be modeled anyways, but where that shows up in the drawing and isn't calculated within the model. So it really helps us to see that information comparison between a 2D drawing and a 3D model, which is, like everything else we've been talking about today, really helping us to collaborate with the whole project team. I'm going to let Harry wrap this up.
I was polite and I was on mute. So thank you, Laura and Kyle. Some great information. So one of the comments I'll make before I close this out is that, you know, we have mentioned a lot of different software that we use, and you know, we're not promoting any particular solution, but I've been in presentations before when somebody throws something up and I have to go up later and I say, what were you using? Because that looks really fascinating. So I think it's good to mention, but the takeaway is not what software we use, but what we are able to do with it. There are other platforms that do something similarly. You know, in some cases there are a few where it's very unique, and hey, this is the only thing we found that does this exact you know, function. So there certainly are some of those cases. But, you know, for instance, what Laura was just talking about, the takeaway there is that it's important to have a central database that the whole team can log into and share information. So you have one source of truth. has to be very collaborative. It has to do versioning. You have to be able to control permissions. So we have found that the software we're using does that very well. But I hope that what you'll take away is not so much the variety of software we use, but what we're able to do with it. And if you go out, if you're not doing any of these processes on your own, is go out and search the market and just try to keep in mind what some of the key takeaways are, and find a solution that works for you all. So now closing us out, we found a few things about the virtual design and construction process that we have learned, and I want to pass some of those on to those who are maybe just starting, or even you're already using some VDC tools. Is we think it has to start with the owner. To make this truly collaborative, the owner needs to set the table to allow that with contracts. So the owner is really where this starts to get the best process. The team needs to understand the owner's goals and the project's goals. So each of those can be slightly different. It's important to know what those goals are when getting the team together and getting started. You've got to match the BIM goals with the project delivery method. Some delivery methods are more conducive to a very collaborative process that gives the time and the owner input to allow some of these goals to happen. For instance, you can do things with construction management or integrated project delivery that you probably cannot do if it's just a hard bid type process. So you have to kind of match those goals with what your actual delivery method is. You got to be sure that the contract that's in place supports a collaborative BIM process and this free-flowing exchange of information. That kind of goes back to what I said right out of the gate. It has to start with the owner. It's also good to use BIM-specific documents that have already thought through all the pitfalls. It's also important to use an industry-endorsed guide to create a BIM execution plan from the get-go. And there's several out there that are very good, but look for one of those to really give you an idea of how to create this project. And last, again, include the whole team in planning. Be sure everybody's at the table at the beginning when you start planning about what VDC services you're going to use on the project and how those need to be organized. And last, select team members who have a proven record in using a BIM process. So at that, again, thank you for having us. And I'd like to now open it up for questions. I have one quote here. You can peruse that while we are getting ready to take questions.
That was great. Appreciate it. Obviously, you're talking about that, and there's a lot that goes into it. What percentage of projects do you guys utilize this technology on these days?
When we started 14 years ago, we were very specific. It was, generally it was our larger public projects that we did this on. But as time has gone on and we found that the tools are so useful, we basically kind of take a more surgical approach. Almost every project has some aspect of VDC. Well, they all have some aspect of VDC. We're using 360 photos on every project. As far as a coordination, like with our multifamily projects, Kyle has really helped in putting together a very specific process for looking at certain things, looking at post-tension slabs, the podium slabs, looking at amenity spaces. So we kind of have a shopping list depending on the project type of where we're going to provide BIM services. It's not like one option fits all projects. We'll just pick a particular issue and see what we can do to help it.
Gotcha. The X-ray vision is awesome. How many times as a structural engineer I've said I wish I had X-ray vision, and that especially for facilities, hospitals, long term that are going through a number of those renovations and changes. My goodness, that could be immensely helpful, I would think.
Yeah, Kyle, do you have any comments to add to that?
No, I mean,
any example? You had an example particularly where that was helpful, where the team came to you and they were looking for something, I think, in a post-tension slab.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, there's, the schedules of the design and construction, it doesn't always align. So sometimes there's some changes that are made, after the fact. So it's good to be able to go back and just verify what are the structural conditions in that area. It's not an exact, things can always shift when concrete's poured on it, but it gives you an approximate. And then if you have to go back and x-ray, it's okay. But it's definitely saves a lot of time than trying to pull up a photo in some random folder or dive through all these files. It just click of a button, it's right there. So we're
Yeah.
looking at ways to better optimize it, but yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the video.
Yeah, agree. I mean, obviously, I think you're right. If you're getting into really the specifics and quarter of an inch makes a difference, or you're using X-ray or GPR or something, you're really checking for it. But to look and say, okay, this area looks generally okay, or we know what we're about to get into in this area, that tremendous help.
Yeah, Kyle, or I guess anybody, what is your approach to support 5 or 10 years down the road? Because that's really, I was on a project last year and the building was only 10 years old, and we were trying to get plans to see what was the pile caps that are here, and nobody seemed to find them. The owner's like, well, they may be in a box somewhere, or we changed the server and now they're gone. Is that something that you'll keep, you think, forever? And then if the client ever comes back, you can say, yeah, I've got it right here.
I can say that we did go fully digital several years ago, and we do have a retention policy. I can't tell you the terms of that retention policy, but everything that we do at the end of a job is closed out and is stored digitally. I know open space has a 10-year retention policy that stuff stays on their servers for 10 years, and then we have the ability to download that and also store it as well if we desire. If a client wants to be sure that they have a record of that stuff, we're able to get that for them.
But I can add, like, just in the typical, like when Harry closed it out, talking about, like, basically it's driven by the ownership. What I've noticed is there is a bit of a gap there just in how typical processes are worked, of where maybe people don't know what they're asking for. But that's something where, looking down the road 5-10 years, I think that's just going to become a bigger part of the contract and the coordination is, hey, what do we do with all this stuff at the end of a job? Right now, it's just kind of getting thrown in like a digital folder, for lack of better terms right now, but it's being more strategic about it.
And also when we think more about models of deliverable, that's another piece of it too, that, when Harry was talking about starting with the owner, that's really something that I shouldn't say needs to be, that it's helpful if it's something that the owner wants, that, you start from the beginning knowing that that's what you're going for. And it can be different levels depending on how they're using it. But that's another thing that I think may be coming in the future, especially for when we think about large institutions. Aaron was talking about hospitals. When we think about hospitals, universities, things like that, school systems, like public entities, I think we'll start to see more of that at some point in the future.
Really good job. Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? All right. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Jessica, again, should be sending some stuff out to everybody who attended. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll be calling you guys, right? That drone and looking for it. That's great. The superheroes.
All right. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.